I'm your host, and here on Gurvion, we explore the stories, mysteries, and hidden truths that most people never stop to question. And one more thing, I want to be completely transparent with you. Some of the visuals in this video are created with the help of AI, but the research, storytelling, editing, and voiceover are my own work.
The United States is currently the richest country in history, but for over a century after it was discovered by Europeans, almost no one wanted anything to do with North America. When Christopher Columbus sailed west, he was looking for spices and trade routes to Asia. What he found instead were islands in the Caribbean. The Spanish quickly zeroed in on those islands in South America, where they could extract immediate wealth in the form of gold and silver. Spain did send an expedition up into North America in the 1530s, but they didn't find any precious metals. Because it lacked obvious riches, the Spanish basically wrote off the northern continent as a useless expanse of land. It took nearly another 100 years before the English finally managed to carve out their first successful permanent settlements along the eastern coast at Jamestown and Plymouth. America began as a collection of neglected, heavily forested settlements at the very edge of the known world. The American colonists eventually pushed back against British taxes, fought a revolution, and on July 4, 1776, declared their independence. But winning the war caused an immediate internal crisis. The original 13 colonies were functioning as 13 distinct, messy little countries that were united in name only. Recognizing the new nation was failing fast, the founders scrapped their original framework and wrote a brand new constitution, simply to create a federal government that could actually function and pay its bills. Even with a working government and George Washington taking office as the first president, the new United States was a fragile, indebted startup. And as you can see on the map, it was completely boxed in by massive territorial claims held by Spain to the west and Great Britain to the north. Across the Atlantic, Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in France and made a secret deal with Spain to take back control of the massive Louisiana territory right on America's western border. American settlers relied heavily on the Mississippi River to transport their goods, and a French-controlled river was a serious economic threat. So, the U.S. sent envoys to France with a simple objective: buy the port city of New Orleans to secure their trade routes. But Napoleon was preparing to invade Britain and needed cash immediately. He surprised the American negotiators by offering to sell them the entire Louisiana territory. This document is the treaty between the United States and the French Republic, finalizing the purchase for $15 million. With a single signature, the United States doubled its physical size. The Louisiana Purchase demonstrated that the young republic could absorb millions of acres of land and expand its borders through commerce rather than just military conquest. Down south, Mexico had just won independence from Spain and invited Americans to settle the sparsely populated region of Texas. American settlers quickly outnumbered the locals, rebelled against the Mexican government, and broke free to form their own independent republic. Annexing Texas triggered a war with Mexico. The U.S. won, paying $15 million for vast northern territories, including California. Meanwhile, a peaceful agreement with Britain secured the Lower Oregon Territory. Lastly, the U.S. bought a final sliver of Mexican land, locking in the southern border. Congress even passed a quirky law called the Guano Islands Act, allowing American citizens to claim any uninhabited offshore rocks they could find, strictly to mine bird droppings for fertilizer. Driven by a population that was doubling every 20 years and the sudden discovery of gold in California, it took just half a century of rapid deal-making and conflict to push the American border completely across the continent to the Pacific Ocean. Expanding so quickly created fatal internal pressure. The northern and southern states were deadlocked over the economics and morality of slavery. Every new piece of western land forced the question of whether slavery would expand alongside the borders. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 pushed the southern slave states to officially separate from the Union and attempt to form their own country. The resulting Civil War left massive devastation and structural ruin across the country. Hundreds of thousands of people died, but the North ultimately prevailed and the slaves were freed. The Union's victory reunified the fragmented states under one federal government, settling the question of whether this massive territorial collection could actually survive as a single country. By the late 19th century, the United States had completely run out of continuous land to expand into. The continental borders were set. Then, the Tsar of Russia, Alexander II, decided he wanted to offload a massive freezing territory in the far north, and he offered it to the Americans. This is the actual U.S. Treasury warrant used to buy Alaska. As you can see written across the center, the U.S. acquired the enormous territory for exactly $7,200,000. Further out in the Pacific, American businessmen took control of the Hawaiian Islands. Driven by the fear that rival powers like Germany or Japan might claim the islands as a naval base, the U.S. eventually annexed Hawaii, establishing a permanent military presence. The American shopping spree had crossed the oceans, transforming the country into an emerging global empire with interests thousands of miles from its own shores. This expansionist momentum quickly collided with the remnants of the Spanish Empire. When a U.S. warship mysteriously exploded and sank in the harbor of Cuba, American newspapers and politicians demanded military action. The U.S. declared war on Spain, and in a matter of months captured Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Following the war, President Theodore Roosevelt invested heavily in building out the second-largest navy in the world to project this newfound power across the globe. To ensure that powerful navy could easily move between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, the U.S. backed the independence of Panama and poured resources into constructing the concrete locks of the Panama Canal. In just over a century, a fragile startup founded by anti-imperial rebels had purchased, conquered, and negotiated its way across a continent, ultimately replacing the very European empires that had originally claimed the new.
So tell me in the comments what you want to see next. AI, psychology, hidden history, or mysterious stories. You choose the topic, I'll uncover the story. Welcome to Gurvion.